Hey, folks, and welcome to Typology, the show on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the human adventure, all through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. Hey, really excited to have you all here today, folks. We've got a really great guest. I mean, this interview goes deep right out of the gate, people. I'm talking about Enneagram 8 guest, Christina Rasmussen. She is an acclaimed grief educator and best-selling author of Second First, Where Did You Go? And Invisible Loss. And she has a brand new book that she is just now releasing called Invisible Loss, Recognizing and Healing the Unacknowledged Heartbreak of Everyday Grief. And in this book, she gives us a framework for recovery from unrecognized grief and teaches us how to stop living in survival mode. You're going to love this. She helps us identify invisible losses. She helps us identify our 3 inner narrators, how to interrupt survival thoughts. On and on, this book is chock full of things that will help you identify and work through grief, whether you know you have the grief or not. So you're going to want to listen to this interview, and you're going to want to go get that book for sure. Invisible Loss, Recognizing and Healing the Unacknowledged Heartbreak of Everyday Grief. Again, talking about Christina Rasmussen, Enneagram 8. That's it for me, Anthony Skinner. And now, without any further ado, here is the host of our show, Ian Cron.
So just, sometimes it takes a while to dial
to get
in
it
type.
right. So you saying I have a strong 4, and it may be that's shadowed by the traits that resemble an 8?
Yeah. So in other words, you may be a 1-to-1 4.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but you could be. You feel very 8-ish to me.
Yes, I do. I know.
But
Yeah.
Sometimes a 1-to-1 4 presents in a very they can be very, and you're interested in art, and the fact that you have a high 5 score
Yes.
in the list means that I would, if I were interviewing you to figure out your type with you, I would be sort of intrigued, and I would want to rule out that you weren't a 1-to-1 4. So read up on 1-to-1 4s, and Beatrice Chestnut has a good book called The Complete Enneagram.
I'm going to get that book, because it's when I saw that I was an 8, it was like, yep, it was immediate.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But then the struggle to say yes to the creative aspect of me, which is the art, which is, by the way, a very big part of me. This is when I'm the happiest. There's nothing that can compare, or like I am. And I spend many hours painting a day.
And here's another thing to think about. Like any type can be an artist.
Any type can be an artist.
Yes. Yeah. Now, any type can be an artist. So every type, doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
There's tons of 1 artist and 5 artists and 6 artists and 7 artists. So it is not the sole purview of 4s to be the artists. They're just disproportionately represented, because 4s typically have, you don't strike me as having a labile emotional expression. Like you don't strike me as someone who has super highs and super lows, at least not in our conversation.
It's the same. I'm intense all the time, Ian.
Yeah, right. So exactly. So 4s tend to be, particularly when they're younger, like really labile in their mood and emotional expression and intensity. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just check it out just for and it's just good to learn about all the other types, and know like how different we are. I think as a therapist, you'll go, oh, this is useful. Yeah, it's another model. It's useful, and it's a great doorway into conversation with people about their inner architecture. That's it.
And prepared, you're prepared to understand someone, like you inviting your guests, and their Enneagram before they sit down. I would love to know. It's amazing to have this knowing about someone, without meeting them. It feels safe to me. It feels like, and that's why immediately I wanted to know, what are you? I want to know.
Yes.
I want to know what about you, Anthony? What number are you?
I'm a 4 as well.
You are a 4. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
How does that work?
But we are different types of 4s.
Yeah. How is that?
So
did you know, Ian? I don't know your history. Were you friends before you worked together? Like,
yes.
Like, did you know that you guys were both 4s from the beginning?
No. When we first met, I wasn't doing Enneagram work. And that came, a couple of years into our relationship that I wrote a book about it, and off we went to the races. But I would say that though Anthony and I have a lot of similarities and a lot of differences, right? I think I'm probably a little bit more. I think I'm more image conscious than Anthony is. I think I'm more. I probably worry more about what others think about me than he does. Although I've come a long way on that, but I'm aware that that's kind of a part of me that I need to keep up in my sight, so it doesn't become problematic.
But Ian, you also don't, by the way. This is how you come across to me. You do care, but you also don't care.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Tell me more.
I have the sense like you definitely, for sure, you want to make sure that, you show up in a specific way, but there's also this nonverbal message I'm getting from you also that feels really healthy, that says, it is what it is, take it or leave it. This is me. This is who I am.
Yeah. I think that's the gift of having gotten older.
And it's like, and I would say even though you have, you talk about caring what other people think, you're never comfortable with that about yourself. You know what I mean, Ian? You're aware of it and you're not comfortable with that.
Yeah. Well, I just, I keep an eye on it so that I don't end up compromising who I am in service to winning people over.
Yeah.
And I think also, and people know this about me on the show, I'm in 12-step recovery for alcohol and drug addiction. And so that model, that program for living, which is separate from the Enneagram, has also made me someone that has had to look carefully at my inner world and own what's not so great and also own what is beautiful at the same time.
Yes.
So good shadow work. I've had to do good shadow work. So I actually owe a lot to, I would say as a 4, that one thing that is true is that, and by the way, both Anthony and I are songwriters. So that was actually my first job, was really as an artist.
Wow.
And as a writer, I think like an art, I don't think about writing content. I think a lot about good writing, like about being a good writer.
Yes.
Like the art of writing is really important to me. And I'm very persnickety and very, I drive myself hard to write good sentences and to capture ideas in good stories. And so, yeah, I feel like I've been blessed with the 12 steps and my community that surrounds me and helps me to live as the highest expression of who I am all the time, and, but I deeply, deeply care about relationships and helping people plumb the depths of who they are and of their experience so that they can get as much meaning and understanding about what this life means to them. That is what, when I go out to do speaking engagements for companies and stuff like that, that's what lights me up. When I see the lights go on in someone's eyes and they go, oh, that's why. And that new level of self-awareness and self-knowledge and self-discovery has led them to a deeper appreciation of just what a profound, beautiful mystery it is that we are here, and that we get to continue to grow and grow and grow and grow toward becoming people who are clear, connected, compassionate, kind, generative, giving, all the stuff that I hope for. Now, what are we talking about me for? Except that I'm a 4. Except that I'm a 4 who loves to talk about himself.
I do have a Christina question.
Yes.
Christina, this is just interesting to me. When you're thinking of your younger self, when you would experience pain, would your instinct be to get over it or to immerse yourself in it?
When I experienced pain as a younger, I was so overcome by how painful it was that I was kind of frozen within that pain, I think. And it felt as if I had no control over it. I couldn't eat when I had a boyfriend breakup when I was much younger. He cheated on me, and of course, I couldn't possibly betrayal. Ian, right? He said, couldn't possibly ever consider forgiving him. And I knew we were together for like 5 years. I knew that was the end. He was my first real boyfriend. It was so catastrophic, such a catastrophic event for me that I couldn't physically be in my body anymore. And of course, as my life progressed, more tragic events took place. And I thought, what is this? I can't take on all of this pain. It was impossible. And I think the question as to whether I was in it, facing it, or avoiding it, or it was almost like I couldn't run away from it because I was in pain all the time. And I couldn't face it because I was in pain all the time. It was stuck and inside of it all. And when my husband was diagnosed, I remember feeling like I wish it was me. It would have been easier to experience losing him. It would have been easier to experience losing myself, my own passing, versus having to face my death versus losing him. I learned a lot through having no choice but to go through pain for a long period of time. And if I was to answer this question from this older self, how I do with pain now, grief, loss, I don't like it at all. I actually believe that we deserve to have an easier life as we get older, and that especially if you've gone through so much earlier on, like when we get a break, and I feel like I, knock on wood, I'm having a break right now, and I feel like I'm supposed to experience the next best chapter of my life. I'm very hopeful about that, and also I'm very vulnerable. And as an A, what people don't know is because they see my strength and they see my leadership and they see me standing in front and making new rules and creating new content and leading the way, is that all of that is very hard for me. It is a very hard thing for me to. I can do it easily, meaning there's an instinct, there's immediate knowing of what I need to do. The less prepared, the better I am. The less on the spot. I believe in that versus planning and preparing. I'm better, more organic. But at the end of each of these experiences, which are very many in my life, I'm tired and I want someone to take the lead. I want someone to tell me what to do. I want someone to show me the way. Go over there. That's where it's safe. Go over there. This is where it's happy. You go. Let me tell you what to do, Christina. And I don't have that in my life in any relationship. So I don't think I've ever said this out loud. So Anthony, thank you for that question. It kind of helped me process out loud more. And this is why this conversation is so great, because why have anything else? Why have? Yes, I wrote a book or two or three, and if this is the more important conversation, this is the conversation that's going to help the listener, and it's also going to give us an experience to remember, a memory,
Yeah, for sure. But I do want to talk about the book for a second, and this wonderful new book of yours called Invisible Loss.
Yeah.
Because you take away the stereotype that, of grief being only about major life events,
Yes.
right? Like life has lots of small invisible losses. Can you talk more about that?
Yes. So imagine you experience something hard, but not catastrophic. It could be actually a parent being parented by someone who never looked you in the eyes directly when they spoke to you, that maybe favored your brother or sister, but it wasn't loud, or you couldn't have words for it. You didn't know what it was that you were experiencing as a child. There were moments of impact in our life, not only as children, but grown-ups. You're in a meeting, you're sharing something, nobody seems to care about your point of view. You could go in the bathroom and cry your eyes out, but you can't really say anything about it in a way that allows you to have empathy for yourself and compassion for what just happened, and that it is a moment of impact. And what happens, our perception of self is shifts out of what we know about ourselves, and it changes to become more a reflection of what the person across from us is, we think, are experiencing about us. And when that happens, we lose what I call the original self. And what the original self is, and the reason why I'm not calling it authentic or true self, is because we came into this life in a certain way. Who we are without the external influences, who we are without survival, without that survival mechanism, who we are naturally, organically, just being ourselves. And that's why it's important to me in every conversation to show up exactly as I am and not worry about how it should be and what kind of conversation I'm going to be having. Because when we don't step into that original self and we leave that original self behind, we actually stop that. For many people, that original self has stopped evolving many years ago. They've left that part of themselves behind when they survive what I call a moment of impact. But they unconsciously stayed in survival mode beyond that moment of impact. We go in what I call the waiting room, a place between that moment of impact and the life that we could have going forward. And we get stuck in between the past and what potentially could be the future. We don't know that we are stuck in that waiting mode, in that kind of stagnant experience. And we live our life from that survival place. And we make choices that have nothing to do with who we are and what we want and what we crave and what we need. We make choices trying to please other people and show up in the ways that allows for no more rejection, no more moments of impact, no more anyone doubting who we are and our skills or our abilities, because that is way too painful. But in doing so and in doing that, we actually living a slightly wrong life. We have the wrong jobs, the wrong relationships, and we don't even know it because it looks good enough from the outside. It looks like we're doing okay as far as everyone else is concerned. So I discovered in my classes, imagine since 2010, I've been running these life reentry classes, and around 2014, I started seeing that the people with tragedies, when we managed to get out of that waiting room and re-enter their life and start feeling alive again and starting over, something would pull them back in. And it took me a little while longer to realize and to have the courage to believe that this was not the tragedy that's keeping them back. Because we've been told, and I've studied this and I've seen it, grief lasts forever and, we can never get over something like that. So it would have been really easy to assume that what's keeping them stuck and bringing them back into that waiting room, back into that wrong life, wasn't the tragedy, was something invisible. And why I called it something that we had no words for, no label, no understanding. We didn't know when the moment of impact happened. And it wasn't even losses that are not like life and death losses, breakups. I'm not even talking about those things. I'm not even talking about the traumas that we acknowledge in our world. I'm talking about things that nobody ever talks about because we are not being asked to talk. Actually, Ian, the way you were talking about your mother, by the way, and the detailed description of your relationship with your mom in the way that you described it allowed me to see so much more than what most people describe their relationships with their parents. And you said you had a lot of therapy about your relationship, but there's something here, there's an extra awareness that I'm seeing. So I kind of separated the self into three narrators: that survivor self, the thriver self, which is that original, closer to kid-like self, and then the watcher self, which is the witness, that higher self. And the conversation that's taking place within ourselves every day is mostly from the survivor self, the choices we make, the behavior we exhibit, the habits, we are surviving our life every single day, and we don't even know it. Even when things look good, we're actually still surviving. The relationships, the bills, the responsibilities. There's a huge. We are living in a waiting room because we don't have direct access to that kid self, to that thriver self, and that watcher self. So we have to do a lot of work to access the true nature of who we are. And your work and what you describe when you go and speak on stages, you seem to help people kind of connect with who they really are. So we are in an epidemic. Most people say, you have nothing to complain about. Look at all the things you have. We live in a materialistic world that actually shadows the catastrophic inner loss that we experience every day. This is a rough, tough world. We live in a cancel culture. We're afraid of what we might say, that people misunderstanding things we say. It's very rare that we find ourselves in this kind of conversations where it's a safe environment to show up as we are, exactly as we are.
I love these categories, and I'm not always big on taxonomies, but I do like things like, models, right? So you talk about the watcher self, the thriver self, the original self, the fragmented self, and I just think that they're shortcuts to deeper conversations, but they're helpful, right? We got to start somewhere with a model. And I do feel like my witness self, as you've described it, what little you've said about it, I think is pretty on. Like, I do feel like, and Anthony shares this with me, we both have a deep love for meditation.
Wow.
And that's just also part of my recovery, right?
Yeah.
Is like maintaining equanimity. And part of equanimity is this ability to stand back from my current or my immediate experience and to just be curious in a very non-blaming, compassionate way.
Yes.
Like, oh, that's interesting. Look how you're reacting. That's fascinating. And why are we doing that now? Or do you think that sending go on that email is a good idea? So I feel like that's pretty good. I don't know. And I resonate with the original self. And I think about the work of Winnicott and others, and this, I guess Winnicott would have talked more about the true self, like that first expression of us, yes. Right? Prior to all of the capital T trauma, little t trauma, prior to all of the yes. messaging that we picked up, and, prior to needing to embark on a process of individuating and differentiating, becoming your authentic. You didn't use the word authentic, but a reclaiming of the original self. Right. I'm still working on that. I'm definitely still working on that and reconnecting with that child part of me. I do think there's a little piece of me sometimes that's a little still embarrassed of the child that I was, like in a way.
Who were you? Ian? But who was that? Who are you able to remember? I've come across so many people that could not actually remember the real self. They could not yes. remember. Do you remember? And are these memories? How are these memories? Which memories are coming forward versus the ones that are not?
So it's changed over time.
See?
So as I've gotten older, I will say that I should have probably said this. When I was younger, I felt more embarrassed about my child self. As I've gotten older and had lots of healing and done lots of work, and a lot of spiritual work, all the stuff, I look back now and I realized about maybe a couple of years, not that many years ago, that I was a very, actually quite a tender, sweet, artistic kind of kid. And I wasn't a lot of trouble. I was actually kind of a sweet kid. And, I eventually got into trouble at times. But even when I was getting into trouble, even when I was kind of in my bad boy years, I would say that I had forgotten that very tender, very sweet, very loving kid that I was. And I really was. I mean, just by nature. And a kid who just loved to get along. I mean, I just loved getting along with people. And but also had a lot of, as a arts type, I did see the world differently, and it was often misunderstood by people how I saw the world. They would say it was weird or strange or odd, and the fact that I was journaling and writing poetry and doing all that stuff, and very drawn to nature and very drawn to the outdoors, not as an outdoorsy type, but that I just felt very connected spiritually inside when I was outside. Like I just, there was something transcendent to me. Like everything just brimmed with transcendence.
Wow.
What are you laughing at,
Just
Anthony?
I feel like I'm looking in the mirror.
Oh,
you guys.
When you said that, like journaling thing, and like just where you were going, and like at a young age, and like just how different it was from other people.
Yeah. It was so different. And I wasn't into sports. I was very small. Yeah. And it made me a world-class target for bullies.
Yes.
Right? Because I was off the normal beaten path of all the other kids. And so, I just was like walking around with a target on my back for every bully in my school. And they did a good job of beating that original self out of me.
Can I tell you something? Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, but this is why you are approaching your invisible loss so quickly and know exactly the moments of impact that knocked out that original self, and you had to survive and get into trouble to kind of, the word kill comes, like completely delete that part of you that got that response from others, and it's actually a very painful experience, and that's what I call a primary invisible loss. Ian, that's what it is. Anthony, tell us what you're going to say.
I was just going to say, like, different but same. So I was that little artsy kid, but I was in football, I was in band, I was in what's called Future Farmers of America. It's called FFA. I was in all those things.
Cool.
But I was still A4. And I remember, I think about, Future Farmers of America, they're all like cowboys, right? And I would show up and I would be wearing something because my sister was in fashion design, So, and I loved fashion, so I would show up and whatever it was, I was wearing, oh man, they would just like have a time with me, And sure enough, like the next year or the next season or two, they would all be wearing that thing I had worn like 2 years before,
Yes.
But not remember that I was wearing that.
Remember.
Still laughing at the new thing that I'm wearing, But just, so just artsy.
But and part of that was it fed that need. Like, I feel like I loved making a statement.
Oh,
I loved people seeing me. Yeah. Like there was a peacocky side to me, that was a little bit, but that I don't feel like I need to reclaim that because that was sort of driven by some insecurities too, that I don't really have anymore. Yeah. But I love that this idea that we all carry invisible losses that need recognition, processing, reintegration, so we don't get stuck in the waiting room. Mm-hmm. And so that we can spend less time living in our survival self. Yeah.
Yes, and I would say because of what happened and the many moments of impact we had, the survivor voice and behaviors, I would say, if I was to look at a group of people, I would say most of them are at 80%, and only the thriver self, which is that kid-like, sweet, like for everyone has a different version of that thriver self, is only at 5%. And then the witness at 10, 15 depends the allocation between that 20% in the end. So my goal is to help people decrease that survivor percentage. So for example, we're sitting here having this conversation, having an interview and having to do all these interviews, meeting new people every single time, my survivor self would come and say, oh my God, here we go again, or this is going to be hard. Have you studied your book? Have you read up do you remember everything? That are you ready for all the questions? And I'm generalizing here, but it would stress me out and it would increase my anxiety. And if I let it, and if I didn't do what I call like a mental stack, basically, here's my survivor thought, here's my pattern, here's what it is I'm surviving. This is not me. This is my protector that's coming in to save me from a moment of impact that can happen. Prepare myself so I could be so good at this that there's no rejection, right? And then I'm aware of what that is. And as long as my watcher self, that witness self says, Christina, you see what that is? That's what it is. What is the real? What's the truth? What is the thriver? What is that original you? And the original me and who I am really is that I am the expert on this. I've spent 14 years and helped tens of thousands of people in my work to find who they really are and exit that waiting room. And it's such an antithesis and duality between what the survivor self is trying to tell you, to convince you, to prepare you, to the truth of who you are. And the more you're able, Anthony and Ian, to bridge that gap between what the survivor is telling you the truth in and what the truth is, the happier your life will be. We wouldn't be having this conversation if all of us hadn't done the work, because I'm hearing that you guys have done this work in different ways to allow for you to create a podcast. By the way, and I just want to say, I've done like 30 interviews. And
wow. Yeah.
I
know this feeling.
For this book, specifically for this book. And let me say that 90% of them are very similar. They're very great people, great hosts. I loved all of them, but very, very similar. I remember Addison asking me, what is your Enneagram? And I was like, all of a sudden you stood out from the crowd by a lot. And I was counting the days to get to this day where I could have this conversation. And that tells me for you, and I don't know what it took you to allow for this type of podcast and this type of messaging, to say yes to this. But I just want to say, I really appreciate it because we live in a world that's blending with everyone else's. Everything is the same, whether we dress the same, talk the same, have the same questions. And Ian and Anthony, like, thank you for allowing people like me to have this conversation. I don't know if everyone's taking the opportunity to really have a blast sitting here, but I hope they are, because it's a breath of fresh air.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot to us. Does. And I just want to remind everybody that we're speaking with our new friend, Christina Rasmussen, author of the new book, Invisible Loss, Recognizing and Healing the Unacknowledged Heartbreak of Everyday Grief. Wow. We're going to have you back on, because my brain is like digging around on, we haven't even got to internal family systems yet.
God.
We haven't even gotten to, conversations around recovery. We haven't gotten yet to conversate with so much more to talk about eights. And will you come back on the show?
I would love it. Would be my pleasure, my honor. Like I said, this is so great. So great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And listen, everybody, please go out and check out and hit the buy button on Christina Rasmussen's new book, Invisible Loss, Recognizing and Healing the Unacknowledged Heartbreak of Everyday Grief. And as always, my loved ones, may you have love, may you have joy, may you have peace, may you have healing, and may you have rest. Until next time.
Thank you.